Hello, this is Mr. Henry, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my gardening philosophy. I've been gardening, vegetable gardening, for many years, and over time I got to where I turned to these raised beds. I always thought that was a good idea, and it is. But traditional crops, well, here's my philosophy: is if you're a gardener, you're a gardener because you want to be independent. And if you have a traditional vegetable garden, I have learned you are not independent. There are organic gardeners who they only use manures and compost and things like that, and I've tried that, and it does work on some things, but the area I live in has got problems with soil, and so you have to send soil samples in every so often to the county extension service, and they test them, and then they send you a list of chemicals you need to add to your soil. And so as long as you're dependent on that infrastructure being there and dependent on the money to send to them to get that done, you're not really independent. However, there are crops, and this is one of them. Okra came from Africa, I think, and like tomatoes, I think, come from Venezuela. And if you go to those places, okra is just everywhere, or tomatoes are everywhere. Well, in southeastern United States, this is everywhere. This is called a sunchoke, or a Jerusalem artichoke. It looks like a sunflower because it's in the sunflower family. We've cut the tops off just because they were laying over. But the flowers are smaller, and when you pull them up, they have these tubers on the bottom of them. Now, cool thing about these is you can cook them, or you can just cut them up and put them on a salad. They need to be peeled normally. These are so small that you can just throw them in your mouth and eat them. But they are a survival food. They give you plenty of energy, calories, carbohydrates. And the good thing about it is, when people look over here and they see that okra, they go, oh boy, I sure would like some okra. But when they see this, they just think Rachel is planting flowers. You know, why in the world should you have a raised bed for those ugly flowers? So it's a good stealthy survivalist food, because if you have a garden and you've got traditional crops and the system falls apart, people are going to come, especially if you can walk for 5 miles in any direction, you won't find a garden around here. So that means I've got so many square miles of starving people that want to kill me to get a piece of okra, but they ain't going to kill me to get a flower. See, that's pretty smart. And there's a lot of other crops like this that we're slowly, gradually getting in here. In fact, I've got wetlands on my property and slightly off my property that I'm filling up with cattails, just transplanting as many as I can, because cattails are really delicious, and they've got a lot of carbohydrates as well as other nutrients. But also, I mean, we've planted things that people recognize, like apples and oranges and peaches and things like that. But oh, and here, before I forget it, here's a raised bed that we planted in probably almost a month ago. And yet you see there's nothing there, because part of our philosophy is to have chickens, so that way we have meat and eggs. And we could put the chickens in a pen and they wouldn't come out here and scratch this garden up. So they took and ate every seed we planted. And there's no point in putting them in there, because the only way you can get these seeds to grow is to keep the chickens penned up. And see, that makes you dependent on the system again. If you have to buy commercial feed for your chickens, then you're not independent. These chickens eat, I saw them yesterday eat a water moccasin. Today I saw them eating a frog. But they eat seeds, they eat grass, they eat anything out there. In fact, the food that we don't want, the peelings, even their own eggshells, crunch them all up and throw them out there, and they turn it. We can put a pile of compost. They'll go out there and turn that compost and eat every little thing out of it. And while they're there, they're making compost. And so anyway, that's another thing about being independent, is if you have sunchokes and put those in, you don't have to worry about the chickens eating the seeds, because the sunchokes will come back every year without replanting. And I've also started a patch of ground nuts, very similar, and they come back every year without replanting. So there you go. That's my gardening philosophy.